In 1899, Asa Candler granted two lawyers the right to bottle Coca-Cola across most of the United States for $1. $1 historical accounts say he never collected. Today, a high-speed line in Brazil can produce up to 81,000 bottles an hour. That scale grew from rights. Candler barely valued rights his company later fought to escape. So was the $1 contract a catastrophic mistake? Or the decision that made Coca-Cola global? The dollar itself was almost irrelevant. The real value was buried in the rights attached to it. The agreement gave Benjamin Thomas and Joseph Whitehead the exclusive right to sell bottled Coca-Cola through most of the country. They could use the trademark on those bottles, establish production facilities, and develop bottling territories. Coca-Cola, meanwhile, agreed to supply the syrup they needed under pricing terms that would later become a serious problem. Candler had not sold the formula, the trademark, or the company. He had handed control of an entirely new version of the business to outsiders. 2 decades later, when the Coca-Cola Company attempted to terminate the arrangement, a federal court would prevent it from doing so. The rights Candler had treated as a minor experiment had become valuable enough to challenge the company that created them. That is the first crucial answer. The mistake was not that Candler should have demanded $10 instead of $1, it was that he did not yet understand what a bottle could do. To understand why, look at the product he believed he was selling. John Stith Pemberton was an Atlanta pharmacist working in the chaotic world of 19th century patent medicines. Historical biographies report that after being wounded during the American Civil War, he became dependent on the morphine used to treat his pain. Pemberton experimented with medicinal tonics containing ingredients such as coca leaves and cola nuts. These ingredients were already being used in commercial remedies promoted for fatigue, headaches, nervous conditions, and other ailments, often with far greater confidence than the medical evidence justified. One of Pemberton's earlier products was an alcoholic tonic called Pemberton's French wine Coca. When Atlanta adopted alcohol restrictions, he developed a non-alcoholic alternative. On May 8, 1886, Pemberton carried a jug of his new syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta. The syrup was mixed with carbonated water and sold for 5 cents a glass. That was Coca-Cola's original manufacturing system. The product did not arrive in a sealed package. It was created behind the counter, one serving at a time. The pharmacy stored the syrup, supplied the water, produced the carbonation, washed the glass, and served the customer. Production and consumption happened almost in the same place. The drink did not need to survive a warehouse. It did not need to endure a delivery wagon rattling over rough roads. It did not need to remain carbonated for weeks inside a container. And if one glass was mixed incorrectly, the next one could be adjusted immediately. Coca-Cola says sales during the first year averaged roughly 9 drinks per day. Pemberton gradually sold his interests before his death in 1888, never seeing what the product would become. Between 1888 and 1891, another Atlanta pharmacist, Asa Griggs Candler, acquired control of the formula and trademark. In 1892, he formed the Coca-Cola Company. Candler transformed Coca-Cola through promotion and syrup distribution. Signs carrying the flowing trademark appeared on storefronts and walls. Calendars, clocks, trays, and free drink coupons put the name in front of people who had never tasted it. But the business remained centered on soda fountains. Coca-Cola manufactured a concentrated branded syrup. Fountain operators supplied the water, equipment, glassware, and labor needed to produce the finished drink. Because water accounted for most of its volume, the company did not have to ship the heaviest ingredient across the country. It was efficient, profitable, and expanding. A bottle appeared to add risk without improving the part of the business Candler already understood. Bottling required more than pouring a fountain drink into glass. The mixture had to be correct before it left the factory. The container had to hold pressure. The closure could not leak. The equipment and reusable bottles had to be cleaned. The product might sit for days or weeks before anyone discovered that something had gone wrong. A careless bottler could produce a flat, contaminated, or poorly mixed drink hundreds of kilometers from Atlanta. The consumer would still see the Coca-Cola name. Candler's skepticism was not irrational. He was protecting a growing brand from a manufacturing system he did not control. Then a confectioner in Mississippi demonstrated what that system could accomplish. In 1894, Joseph Biedenharn operated a soda fountain in Vicksburg. He noticed that demand for Coca-Cola extended beyond the customers who could visit his counter, so he installed bottling machinery in the rear of his store. Biedenharn filled Coca-Cola into reusable Hutchinson-style bottles and shipped cases to farms and lumber camps along the Mississippi River. It was a simple change with enormous consequences. A soda fountain sold Coca-Cola only to people who came to it. A bottle allowed Coca-Cola to go to them. Biedenharn reportedly sent a case to Candler. But the experiment did not redirect Coca-Cola's business. Fountain sales were growing. And a small bottling operation in Mississippi did not yet prove that bottles could be standardized across the country. The warning had arrived. Candler simply interpreted it through a business that was already succeeding. 5 years later, Benjamin Thomas and Joseph Whitehead arrived with a much larger proposal. The two Chattanooga lawyers wanted exclusive rights to bottle Coca-Cola on a national scale. They were not asking Candler to finance the factories. They would assume the expense of building plants, obtaining equipment, buying bottles, hiring workers, and developing the market. From Candler's position, the bargain contained an attractive asymmetry. If bottling failed, Thomas and Whitehead would absorb much of the loss. If it succeeded, Coca-Cola would sell more syrup. The agreement was signed on July 21, 1899. It covered most of the United States, although several territories, including Mississippi and Texas, were excluded. The price named for those rights was $1. Thomas and Whitehead did not invent bottled Coca-Cola. Biedenharn had already proved that it could be done. What they created was a method for multiplying it. They built initial plants in Chattanooga and Atlanta, then confronted an obvious problem. Two facilities could not supply an entire country. The answer was to divide the map. Beginning in 1900, territorial rights were assigned to local operators. These bottlers agreed to build plants and promote bottled Coca-Cola inside defined geographic areas. Some received their rights through layers of parent and sub-parent bottling companies created under the original agreement. The structure looked complicated because it was complicated. But economically, its power was simple. Local bottlers supplied the capital. They purchased machinery and glass. They hired production crews and salespeople. They arranged delivery routes. They persuaded shopkeepers, restaurants, and other businesses to carry the product. Because each bottler controlled a territory, every new retailer and customer increased the value of its own operation. The Coca-Cola Company could expand without owning every building, wagon, truck, warehouse, or bottling machine. This was growth financed from the edges. A centralized company would have needed enormous capital and local knowledge to build a national bottling operation. The franchise network distributed those requirements among people who understood their own communities. Our bottler, in a small southern town, knew which stores received deliveries, which roads became impassable in bad weather, and where a cold drink might sell on a hot afternoon. Atlanta did not need to make every local decision, was the accidental brilliance of the arrangement. But every new bottler also created another place where Coca-Cola could lose control. The syrup came from the company. Yet the finished beverage depended on local water, mixing, carbonation, sanitation, bottles, closures, storage, and handling. The customer did not see those separate responsibilities. The customer saw one name. If the syrup was correct but the water tasted strange, the drink was still Coca-Cola. If the mixture was correct but the closure leaked, the flat result was still Coca-Cola. If a bottle was dirty, damaged, or badly filled, the trademark remained on the package. The company had separated ownership of the brand from physical control of every finished product. That tension became more serious as bottled Coca-Cola grew. The bottlers were not merely vendors waiting for instructions. They had invested their own money, developed their own territories, and created demand that had not existed before. Coca-Cola needed them. They needed Coca-Cola. Neither side could expand as quickly without the other, but their interests were not always identical. And before the company could fully solve that relationship, it faced a more visible problem. Customers were having trouble recognizing the real product. Early Coca-Cola bottlers used straight-sided glass bottles that differed in shape, color, and size. Labels could become damaged or disappear in tubs of ice. Competing drinks adopted similar names, familiar-looking lettering, and packages that could be mistaken for Coca-Cola at a glance. The expanding bottling network had carried Coca-Cola into more places. It had also placed the brand among a crowd of imitations. This was not a problem the secret formula could solve. A customer could not taste the drink before buying it. The package had to establish trust first. In April 1915, the Coca-Cola Bottling Association approved a design competition for a distinctive new bottle. The challenge sent to glass companies was unusually demanding. The bottle had to be recognizable by touch in the dark. Even if it lay broken on the ground, its shape should reveal what it had contained. That requirement changed the bottle from a passive container into part of the trademark. At the Root Glass Company in Terre Haute, Indiana, a team began searching for a shape connected to the name Coca-Cola. 2 employees went to a local library looking for illustrations of the coca plant or the cola nut. They found an image of a cocoa pod instead. Coca was not what they had been sent to find, but the pod's elongated body and vertical ribs suggested a distinctive silhouette. The team developed the idea into a bottle with curved sides and fluted lines. A mistaken plant produced the correct design. Root Glass submitted the concept, and the bottle patent was granted in November 1915. A committee of bottlers and company officials selected the design the following year. The package was specified in a green-tinted glass that became known as Georgia Green. The city ordering the bottles could be embossed on the bottom, creating countless local variations within one recognizable form. And the early bottle was heavy. Company specifications called for at least 14.5 ounces of glass. Once filled with 6.5 ounces of Coca-Cola, each package weighed more than a pound. That weight was expensive, but the bottle performed two jobs simultaneously. It protected a pressurized drink, and it protected the identity of the brand. The formula answered, "What should Coca-Cola taste like?" The contour bottle answered, "Which one is Coca-Cola?" This was cooperation between the company and its bottlers at its most effective. The company needed a uniform identity. Bottlers needed a package consumers would seek out and return. But the same network that helped create the bottle was about to demonstrate how much power it had acquired. In 1919, the assets and business of Candler's Georgia Corporation were acquired by a new Delaware corporation, bearing the same Coca-Cola name. The new owners also inherited the old company's contractual obligations. Those obligations had been created for a much smaller business. The 1899 agreement required Coca-Cola to supply bottlers with syrup. An early amendment established fixed pricing rather than a flexible formula that automatically followed changes in manufacturing cost. The agreement also lacked a simple expiration date. As costs and commercial conditions changed, those terms became increasingly difficult for the company. In 1920, Coca-Cola attempted to renegotiate the syrup arrangement. It proposed a price tied more closely to the cost of manufacturing the syrup. The parent bottlers resisted. They requested detailed information about those costs. Coca-Cola did not provide enough information to satisfy them. Negotiations failed. The company then declared that its contracts with the parent bottlers would terminate on May 1, 1920. The bottlers went to court. Their argument reached far beyond the price of syrup. They maintained that the 1899 agreement had given them continuing rights to the bottled Coca-Cola business. Coca-Cola could not simply withdraw those rights after the bottlers had spent years building plants, territories, and customer relationships around them. A temporary restraining order prevented the company from cutting off the syrup supply. In November 1920, a federal court issued a preliminary injunction blocking termination. The court concluded that the original agreement was perpetual and had conveyed property rights necessary to operate the bottling business. The company that owned the formula could not simply command the bottling network to disappear. The dispute was settled in 1921. New consent decrees replaced the 1899 agreement and established revised terms for the relationship. This was not the end of conflict between Coca-Cola and its bottlers. Changes in syrup pricing, sweeteners, and new products would continue to generate disputes for decades, but the 1920 confrontation exposed the true value of the original bargain. Thomas and Whitehead had paid $1 nominal for rights that Coca-Cola could not easily recover 21 years later. Candler had underestimated the future value of bottling. That was the contractual mistake. Yet the bottlers had made those rights valuable by building the system Candler did not want to finance. Without the agreement, Coca-Cola might have retained greater control. It might also have expanded far more slowly. Then the Second World War tested whether the network could cross oceans. When the United States entered the war, Coca-Cola President Robert Woodruff established a striking goal. American service members should be able to buy a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents wherever they were, regardless of the cost to the company. The promise created a logistics problem. A finished bottle consisted mostly of water and heavy glass. Shipping millions of filled bottles across the Atlantic and Pacific would consume cargo space desperately needed for military operations. The practical solution followed the same logic as the original bottling agreement. Do not ship all the water. Move the ingredients, equipment, and technical knowledge required to make the drink closer to where it will be consumed. In June 1943, General Dwight Eisenhower's Allied headquarters in North Africa sent an urgent request for equipment and materials for 10 bottling plants, along with 3 million filled bottles and the capacity to produce millions more each month. Company engineers and technical specialists traveled overseas to establish bottling operations near military areas. Coca-Cola's historical account says that 64 plants were shipped abroad during the war, and that military personnel consumed more than 5 billion bottles, in addition to serving savings from dispensers and mobile units. Those numbers belong to the industrial history surrounding a conflict of immense suffering. The beverage itself was not the important cargo of the war, but the system built to produce it reveals how bottling changed Coca-Cola. Before the war, the company had already been operating internationally. By the end, bottling equipment, supply networks, and familiarity with the drink had been established in many additional locations. Coca-Cola's account says the number of countries with bottling operations nearly doubled between the mid-1940s and 1960. Bottling had become portable infrastructure. The protected flavor component could travel. Most of the water did not have to. Local facilities could make the finished drink, while equipment standards and production instructions attempted to preserve its identity. The concept that had seemed like a side business in 1899 had become the method by which Coca-Cola crossed the world. Modern Coca-Cola does not operate under one unchanged version of Candler's contract. The original agreement was superseded in 1921, and the corporate system has been restructured many times. But its basic division of labor remains recognizable. The Coca-Cola Company produces and sells concentrates, beverage bases, and syrups. Bottling partners combine those materials with water, and depending on the product's sweetener, they manufacture, package, distribute, and sell the finished beverage. The protected formula supplies identity. The bottling system turns that identity into a physical product. A modern factory, therefore, has to solve the same central problem that appeared with the earliest franchises. How can Coca-Cola be made locally without becoming unpredictably local? The first control is the ingredient that makes up most of the drink. Water that is safe for ordinary consumption may still contain minerals, dissolved gases, disinfectant residues, or other characteristics that affect a beverage's flavor and processing. Bottling plants assess their source water and use the treatment steps required to bring it within the product specification. The equipment can vary because local water varies. The standard applies to the result. Sweetener and concentrate are then combined with treated water according to the approved formulation. Instruments can verify concentration, acidity-related specifications, temperature, and batch identity before the product moves forward. The second control is pressure. Carbon dioxide must be dissolved into the beverage under controlled temperature and pressure. The package must then be filled without allowing that gas to escape as foam. For many modern plastic lines, the container begins as a compact PET preform with a finished neck and thick body. A heat, a stretch rod, high-pressure air, and a mold transform it into a lightweight bottle capable of holding a carbonated drink. The bottle and beverage meet inside a filling system designed to manage the pressure difference. Our cap follows quickly, creating a seal with the bottleneck and tamper-evident ring. The third control is evidence. At Coca-Cola FEMSA's Jundiaí plant in Brazil, documented Seidel lines can produce smaller bottle formats at up to 81,000 per hour. Larger formats run at up to 39,000 because size changes the demands on material, filling, and handling. At 81,000 bottles per hour, 22.5 packages leave the line every second. No human inspector can study each one carefully. Automated systems can check observable features such as fill level, cap position, tamper evidence, label placement, and production codes. A reject mechanism removes a package that falls outside the defined criteria. Laboratory samples and process records test what cameras cannot see. Quality teams can evaluate concentration, carbonation, sensory condition, and microbiological quality according to the plant's control program. The printed code connects a finished bottle to its line, time, and batch. If a problem appears, the affected production can be identified and held. That is how the modern system manages the risk created in 1899. It does not rely on every bottling plant being identical. It requires every approved plant and product to produce measurable evidence that the specification has been met. And Coca-Cola is not literally identical in every country. Approved formulations may use different sweeteners in different markets. A glass bottle, aluminum can, and PET bottle have different physical properties. Storage temperature, package type, serving method, and product age can affect what the consumer perceives. Consistency does not mean erasing every variation. It means controlling the variations that matter. So was the $1 agreement a mistake or a masterstroke? As a contract, it was a mistake. Candler underestimated the commercial value of bottled Coca-Cola. The agreement granted broad territorial rights, imposed restrictive syrup terms, and failed to provide the company with a simple way to end the relationship. When Coca-Cola later tried to escape those terms, the bottlers had enough legal and economic power to stop it. But as a structure for expansion, the agreement was an accidental masterstroke. The bottlers supplied capital Coca-Cola did not have to spend. They understood markets Atlanta could not manage directly. They built plants, delivery systems, retail relationships, and demand. Their independence created conflict, but it also created speed. Candler lost control over part of the business because other people were willing to build that business for him. The deal that cost Coca-Cola control was also the deal that gave Coca-Cola the world. That is why the $1 matters. It was not the true price of the bottling rights. It was evidence of how little their future value was understood. A bottle turned Coca-Cola from an event into an object, at a soda fountain. The drink existed for a few minutes between mixing and consumption. Inside a bottle, it could cross a town, remain in storage, enter a home, travel with a soldier, or reach a customer thousands of kilometers from Atlanta. But the bottle also forced Coca-Cola to become more than a formula. It needed contracts, local investors, package design, pressure control, sanitation, measurement, inspection, and trust. Now return to the line in Brazil. A compact preform becomes a bottle. Local water is brought within specification. Sweetener and concentrate are measured. Carbon dioxide is dissolved. The package is filled, sealed, coated, inspected, and released. The formula defines the target. The bottling system makes that target travel. Then one of those bottles finally reaches you. The cap turns. The seal breaks. The pressure falls. Dissolved carbon dioxide begins to escape. That familiar hiss is the sound of a controlled system keeping its promise, and of a $1 mistake Coca-Cola could never truly escape without giving up the world it created.